Hi, good morning, friends. Whenever we talk about Kargil War, Mirage 2000 aircraft has been the game changer, along with a very special weapon, which was integrated, tested, and proven for the very first time during the live operation. The credit of whole operation goes to every air warrior who was involved in this prestigious project. On this very special day, we have a very famous Kargil War Hero, and that is Air Marshal Raghunath Nambiar. Air Marshal Nambiar retired as Air Officer Commanding in Chief, Western Air Command in year 2019. He served for over 38 years and flew almost 42 types of aircraft. He has been an experimental test pilot and has the distinction of flying Mirage 2000 aircraft for more than 2,300 hours. So let's hear what Air Marshal Nambiar has to say on this historical day about his most adventurous and glorious strike on Tiger Hill. 24 June 1919, 7:30 a.m. is the time which reminds all of us about the Tiger Hill attack. And I'm very sure this day could be even more important to Air Marshal Nambiar, even when we talk of his birthday. Sir, can you please tell us what exactly happened after you got airborne at 6:30 hours from Air Force Station Adampur till the time the laser guide bomb exploded at 7:13 a.m.?
We departed Adampur roughly around 6:30 in the morning. It was an early day for us and very exciting. I think probably the most top-heavy formation that the Indian Air Force has flown. We had 3 Mirage 2000 two-seaters. One was occupied by me as the captain, along with Flight Lieutenant Manish Yadav, who was my co-pilot. The CEO of the squadron, Wing Commander Chabra, had the chief himself, Air Chief Marshal Tipnis, as his rear seat pilot. And the third aircraft was with Squadron Leader Tiwari and Squadron Leader Mohan Rao. So Mohan Rao was the flight commander of the squadron, and the Squadron Leader Tiwari was a test pilot from AST on attachment. This was the strike element, so to speak. The chief in an observer role to stay well within the border and look and see what actually happened in the first LGB strike ever of the Indian Air Force in actual war. We had Mirages coming from Ambala to escort us, armed with the 530D BVR missile. And even today, almost 22 years later, it still feels as if it was just last month or probably a month before that. Primarily because all my senses were at high alert, as I'm sure it was of everybody in that formation. And we were vividly recording into our memory bank everything that happened. I recall the uneasy night sleep because of the excitement involved, the rush of adrenaline of of a mission which was about to be undertaken. There were a lot of variables. There were a lot of doubts, self-doubts, because this was us for the first time doing something which had never been done before, probably in any part of the world. We were dropping an LGB at a target which was perched at 16,300 feet. I mean, the exact height in meters was 5062. That's the sort of altitude at which the LGB was being dropped. I think never before has such a task been attempted. The pod had been recently fitted onto the Mirage 2000, and the modifications are not fully complete. All in all, there were too many variables in this whole mission, and therefore the uh, twitchometer, what we call in the Indian Air Force, was on. We were very worried and excited, and it's all a mix of a number of emotions. So therefore, I recall vividly everything that happened, and I remember taxing out with RT silence, that we did not want to give away the fact that we were getting airborne. Adampur is not too far away from the from Pakistan. We routed ourselves through Dalhousie, and we joined up with our escorts around that place. And then we set course for Kargil. The flight duration was roughly about 30 minutes. We were departing Adampur, which was in Punjab, and it was at that point in time in the Kargil war in a peacetime zone as compared to the hot theater up north in Srinagar, Avantipur, and in Leh and Kargil. The weather was excellent. We could see miles into the distance. And something which I vividly recall is the site of Nunkung Peak, which was en route to our destination. That's Tiger Hill, and that's a unique mountain in the sense that the peaks around it get dwarfed by its size, and it's just next to Kishtiyar, very close to the Kishtiyar Valley, and it was a very useful beacon for us as we set course towards Tiger Hill. Now, Tiger Hill is to the northwest of a village called Dras, which was the center point of the action at that point in time. Tiger Hill dominated the NH-1A, which ran from all the way from Srinagar up to Leh, and was the main line for logistic supply to Leh. And at this point of time, the summer stocking up would have to start so that there was enough stocks in Leh during the winter season. But unfortunately, due to the ongoing problem in Kargil and that neighborhood, the supply of food and essentials to Leh had to be routed through Himachal Pradesh to the Rohtang Pass. We picked up Tiger Hill from a very long range. We had the lightning laser designation pod, which was a day-night pod, and we could look far into the distance. At about 50 nautical miles distance, Tiger Hill was visible to us on the scope. However, the finer details of the target were not yet visible. The target itself was a bunch of about 7 or 8 Arctic igloo-shaped tents perched at the very tip. This allowed the enemy to be sitting there and watching NH-1A and calling back coordinates and directing artillery gunfire from the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir side of the border onto our own vehicles and any convoy movement in that area. And they were fairly effective. You may recall that they had already targeted and destroyed the Doordarshan and the Vivid Bharati station at Kargil. They had even hit the ammunition dump at Kargil by their targeting. And that's the road traffic movement on NH-1A had ceased for most period of the day. It's only possible to move during bad weather or at night with the headlights dimmed and things like that. So that is what was happening at that point in time. Things go very fast in a Mirage 2000. You're at 1,000 kilometers per hour, and there are innumerable checks and so many other procedures. You had a whole plethora of aircraft systems on board. Navigation itself was a piece of cake. We had an inertial navigation system looking after that part of it. We had an autopilot handling the aircraft, but the electronic warfare, system handling, and all the other things which have to be repeatedly done to make sure that everything was in order and we were rightly placed, put in an attack, kept us very busy. There was not enough time to look and admire and stare at the scenery outside. But all in all, I vividly recall everything that happened between me and my co-pilot Manish Yadav. The target itself it became visible at about 30 kilometers. We locked onto it and we put in an attack. I think the video says it all as to what happened.
So these targets, since the very, very small tents, at what distance could you really locate those particular tents? Like Tiger Hill was spotted much earlier. But
Tiger Hill, as I told you, was picked up at about 50 nautical miles distance. In the scope, we could start picking up the tents by about 30 kilometers. They were at that point in time just white smudges. These Arctic tents were, for purposes of camouflage, of a white color. And against the snow background, they were almost invisible. But unfortunately for the enemy, the snow had melted. And therefore, this white tents now became a handicap rather than an asset. They were no longer a camouflage, but more of a giveaway to their location. But because they were perched on a hilltop and with bare black rocks behind them, they stood out in contrast to everything else. And there was no snow around. I mean, there was, at that point in time, very little snow. And even if they were there, they were at, very sparse and scanty and scattered all over. And therefore, it was fairly easy by about 30 kilometers. That is looking within our optical sighting system, our lightning laser designation pod. It was easy to pick out and distinguish these 6 tents. Though in the video which you would be seeing, you see these tents only coming at about 15 kilometers. The fact is, with our own eyes, this is the problem with video recording. They were at those days at 480p sort of recording, and therefore it was not as legible as it was to us sitting in the cockpit. But keep in mind the scope was just 4 inches by 4 inches. That's about the size of some of our smartphones today. And flying an aircraft which is rushing towards the target at 1,000 kilometers per hour. So the challenges were quite many. And you had to sort of not only look at the scope and distinguish what exactly was happening on it, there were a lot of other symbologies around it to make out as to what was the status of the pod, what was the status of the attack modes, all of which had to be factored into our attack planning. And I think it was a wonderful experience. We were there, we were the first to be doing it, and the very fact that we achieved success was a big high.
After having lost 2 aircraft and a Stinger missile hit on a Fortereki Canberra aircraft, there were many threats which were waiting for any strike aircraft. So, can you tell us about those major threats and the challenges which were involved in this particular strike?
Tiger Hill had become the center point of this struggle in the Dras Kargil sector. The enemy was perched right at this very tip. And from there, he had a clear view of the entire stretch of NH-1A, which was critical for our logistics. It was essential that we get him out of that place and secure that hilltop. It was well within our part of Kashmir, and we targeted it with the lightning, primarily because we did not want to put in a Matra LGB, which is an expensive and more sort of a penetrative weapon rather than the blast effect which we wanted on Tiger Hill. We were aware through our intelligence sources and from films taken earlier by other Recce aircrafts that there was this tent on top. The delay on our part was to get our lightning and the payway to ready and in order and to exploit that imagery to hit it. The problem was the lightning pod was at its very early stages of development. It had just been sort of procured in 1997 and had not yet been fully inducted when the Kargil War broke out. We had a team of maintenance personnel both at Adhampur as well as at back in home in Gwalior, where the Mirages are based, and also at AST, working round the clock, trying to set right all the bugs and make sure that the Mirage and the lightning work together in unison. That was the first big challenge, and because of which the lightning pod could not be flown at the altitude which we would like it to be flown at. Given a target which is at 16,000 feet, the Stinger missile has a 10,000 feet bubble around it. So therefore, if there was a Stinger missile of the man-portable, the man-portable air-to-ground missile, a ground-to-air missile, I mean, it was essential that we keep a 10,000 feet bubble around it. We were well aware of what had happened to our Mi-17s. We are also aware of what happened to the MiG-21 as well as the MiG-27. And therefore, we would have preferred to have flown this mission at about an altitude of 26,000 and above, which would have kept us absolutely safe from the Stinger. Unfortunately for us, the lightning pod at that point in time, the laser used to cut off at somewhere around these altitudes because of arcing within the pod, because of a safety feature of the pod which switched it off above a certain altitude. Therefore, we had to necessarily come down. In addition to this, the problem was the payaway 2 weapon which we were employing at that time. This is an American weapon. It had a limitation of about 50 knots of crosswinds. That if the wind speed exceeded 50 knots, the bomb could not be safely and accurately dropped. Now, given all these variables, we had to necessarily come down to less than 25,000 feet for the actual attack. And therefore, we were within the Stinger bubble if we were spotted. So the operational planning was to stay below the height where the laser would switch off, stay at an altitude where crosswinds were not in play, and finally use our own self-protection, like we had flares with us to keep us safe. This was the sort of variables which we had to factor in into our attack. We had air dominance in that area. I mean, it was we had escorts flying with us with the BVRs. The Pakistanis did not have that sort of capability, and we had established some sort of a bubble around which our aircraft would operate with impunity from any air attack. All we were worried about was the Stinger missiles, which could be fired or launched from hilltops. So therefore, we took all precautions which we could. It is a calculated risk, so to speak. And I think we did see a Stinger come up at us, not on this day, but on the previous occasion. And therefore, we were aware that if we took the correct actions of deploying flares, we would remain safe.
Since the French Matra 1000 kg laser-guided bomb was a huge bomb and was specially designed for targets like hangar, bridges, and dams, it was decided to use payaway laser-guided bomb kit along with 1,000-pounder bombs. Since it was not tested and integrated before, it was a challenging task, but was accomplished with great success. Sir, we would like to know the 1,000-pounder bomb being a smaller bomb and having different ballistic characteristics. So how did you cater for that kind of an important change?
It wasn't too difficult. Okay. We used to manually use the tables which were the forward throw for the payaway was described from a certain altitude, how much far it would go at a certain range. These were all known manually from a table, from a 6 degree of freedom of movement of calculations. We knew these numbers, and therefore this delivery was carried out entirely manually. It was not an automatic delivery where the system had to calculate and drop. We did our planning, and in the ground planning itself, we had decided the range at which we would release the weapon for a particular height above the target. And that's exactly what we did. We factored in everything which we had to do, and it was a manual attack, so to speak.
Okay.
Now, today it wouldn't be that wouldn't be the way we would employ such a attack, because our systems are now totally robust. We have modified the system. The aircraft is now got software from Indian agencies, and we have now made the thing go into an automatic mode of release.
Okay. Muntudalo and Tiger Hill type proved the capabilities of Mirage 2000 aircraft, which were also known to an extent. Considering that, do you think, sir, Mirage 2000 was inducted in Operation Safed Sagar a bit late?
No, I don't think so. We were inducted late. The problem was that the Mirages were inducted to the Indian Air Force primarily in the air defense role. We did have some equipment for ground attack, but the weapons and the many other things which go into making an aircraft capable of dropping bombs, like the bombs itself, the fuses, the lanyards, and all the other peripherals, had not been procured. We did not have them in our inventory. More importantly, our pilots were not yet trained. So the challenge was now to get a bunch of pilots who had been fully conversant with air defense, now change over into a role of ground attack. Normally, this takes over 2 or 3 month period, and training is conducted in peacetime, in a very systematic fashion, with a syllabus where we start off with the very basics and thereafter graduate to the very top, where we carry out full-fledged strikes with multiple aircrafts and with multiple weapon loads. We didn't have that liberty. And we were now inducted into the field. We moved to Adampur on the 23rd, if I recollect. But the fact was that when we reached Adampur, the air battle had already started, and the MiG-21s, the MiG-27s, the MiG-23s, and the various other types of aircrafts are already involved in weapon dropping. As you recall, on the 27th, we lost a MiG-21 and a MiG-27. And on the 28th, we lost the single Mi-17 with 4 people on board. And therefore, it was decided that we would definitely have to stay safe of the Stinger. And to operate outside the Stinger bubble, the only aircraft which could accurately target at the altitude was the Mirage 2000. That was what we had. The challenge now lay in getting weapons qualified on the Mirage. We had some old bombs which had been procured for the Ajit aircraft. The Ajit, if you may be aware, is a modification of the NAT. And the Ajit aircraft had long since come and gone. But the bombs were still in our inventory. They're 30 years of life. These bombs had been imported from Spain. And they are 250 kg weight bombs. They were located all over the Air Force, primarily in bases from which the Ajit would normally have operated. They had all to be got together, the fusing components and every other peripheral required for dropping from the Mirage had to be got together into where we were located, and that was at Adampur. And more importantly, we had to get our pilots to speed on we had to get our maintenance team to get to speed to how to fit the bomb, how to fuse it, how to arm it, and all the other things which go, the huge amount of safety checks and procedures which have to go on before an aircraft actually carries a bomb had to be undertaken in quick time. We even went down to Pokhran, carried out some releases of the Spanish 250 kg to convince ourselves that everything was in order and there was no safety issue. And then we started dropping bombs. The first time we started dropping bombs, but this time was on Tololing. Tololing had just been captured, and just north of Tololing was a point called 5140. And that was the first place where we started dropping bombs. By the 6th, we were aware of Muntudalo for quite some time. Muntudalo was located to the northeast of Kargil, and it was it's a logistics base camp. We had seen it grow from a few tents to a few tens of tents, 70 odd tents, and we had films of it coming up. Unfortunately for us, we were not able to, these films were, not very well described, or they were not, their coordinates were not very accurate. So we couldn't actually use those films to get a location on the ground where it was actually located. But fortunately for us, we had, we had the lightning pod with us. So we used to scan that area in a very methodical fashion as to try and discover where Munthodala was. It was well camouflaged. There were a set of about 70 architect tents, and that area was snowbound. It was about 14,000 feet altitude. This is around the 15th and 16th of June. This is just before the Tiger Hill attack, which was on the 24th of June. This area we located on the 16th, and we attacked it immediately on the same day. We hit it with 4 Mirage 2000 armed with 6 into 250 kg Spanish bombs. There's a total of 24 bombs were dropped. Actually, for a target of this size, even 4 or 5 bombs would have written it off. But we were, interested in making sure that everything was wiped out clean. So Munthodala, I think, was a spectacular attack. I think our pilots, all of them, dropped their weapon load very accurately. We did have to go below the stinger bubble, but the element of surprise was in our hand. We put in an attack and got out of the place very safe. And the results are spectacular. I don't think in any operations of the Indian Air Force have we written off about 300 people in just one go. I don't think it's happened even in 71, neither in 65. I think it's a sort of a unique historical event in our IF history. In fact, in the history of the Armed Forces of India, where we have managed to hit so many people, so many enemies together and pulverize them.
So that means even the Spanish bomb, all the provisioning of various weapon launching, items like lanyards and fuses and everything was undertaken during the same period for the very first time.
Everything was there in our inventory. The challenge was to get together the store, get together the experts, those stars, so to speak, who knew how to put the bomb together and then make it happen. And all this happened in those 50 days of the Kargil effort. I must tell you, this is total team effort. We had the entire Indian Air Force was at it ever since we were told to do a task. I think our thinking caps were on. Each branch of the Indian Air Force had to do some work or the other to make this happen, including peace staff. They had to locate people who had expertise in a certain field, get them together, get them moved, position them at the correct place. And that too, all this had to happen in quick time.
Very big time, a very short time. So, in such a tricky situation, don't you think, sir, Indian Air Force becomes the prime force, which should always be a stand-alone force, handled by only trained professional pilots?
Exactly. I would put it to you that, we were operating from Adampur, which in the present scheme of things, the way the present thought process is to have a Western Land Theatre Command and a Eastern Land Theatre Command and a Northern Land Theatre Command. Now, in this scenario, which is hypothetical, we were operating in Adampur, which was in the Western Theatre Command, operating against a target on a daily basis against another Northern Theatre Command. And we could have probably even swung further to the east and acted against enemy force which is operating against the Eastern Theatre Command in the Bareilly area. And this is all from operating from Adampur. Now, given that scenario, if we were to be put in one theater, the coordination involved in operating on a detail by detail basis, I'm not talking about a movement of forces from one command to the other to go under command of another commander. We were operating out of one zone in against an enemy in the other zone. Our challenge was the fact that fortunately for us, all of this was happening in Western Air Command. Now, if we were operating in two commands, that is, if we had, say, Western Air Command operating in, say, the Punjab, and we were to operate against an Eastern Air Command target, the coordination involved will start getting, horrendous. The problem lies when you are supporting such sort of intricate coordinated attack was to get information. You see, the action was taking place in 15 Corps area, which is with their headquarters in Srinagar. We were 4 corps removed in 10 Corps area, or was it 11 Corps? I'm not very certain. Located at Jalandhar.
Okay.
The GLO at Adampur was from 11 Corps Jalandhar. He knew nothing of what was happening in Kargil. It was not only a full command away, that was, he was in Northern Army Command, he was 3 corps sectors away. And therefore, he knew nothing. And he could not tell us what exactly we were to do. Given the state of communications those days, that is secure communications, it was very difficult for him to get information back to us from his compatriots in Srinagar or in the Dras sector as to what exactly was the situation at that point in time. So these were the sort of challenges which we face and which we will continue to face if we get into theatre command. The sort of theatre command which is being envisaged. To split the Air Force into 5 or 6 sections as is being envisaged would be logically foolish because the air is a single medium. I think very wisely, our leadership has decided to compress the Navy into one single unit, one single maritime theatre command, or you can call it a peninsular theatre command or whatever you want to name it. But it has consolidated the Navy into one single force. And that I think is a good thing. But at the same time, without understanding the complications, our people have split the Air Force into 5 parts. What I gather now is some sort of air defense theatre command, which I think is a very foolish concept by people who have not even understood what is defense, much less air. And we have a scenario here where I think Vice Council will definitely prevail, and I think this thing will be called off because it's a not only foolish, it is illogical to have such a sort of a thought process. I think that would be definitely be shown the door. Splitting the Air Force into 5 separate entities, which is expected to sort of logically mix and match together in the air, which is a single medium, I think is not practical and is rather foolish. So my thought process in this is that I think we need to rethink the whole idea of what these theatre commands are about. We require to be aware of the fact that theatres can be as large as India itself. I mean, at least for the Air Force, because of its reach, because of the capabilities of the aircraft, and all of them which are improving. In Kargil, we operated in the Northern Theatre and from operating from the Western Theatre. I think today with the Rafale, we could do almost twice as what the Mirage could do then, 22 years ago. So with technology, with the capabilities slowly increasing, I think it's high time we thought about what we understand by theatre. What I understand by theatre is what decides strategy. And I think strategy should be decided by the nation. Commands are there for execution of that strategy by formulating plans for warfighting. But the strategy comes from the theatre. Now, as you will remember, in the 1971 war, we had something similar like that. The strategy which was put to the armed forces was to hold in the west and attack in the east. That was the strategy. So the people in the west were expected to hold and not really advance forward unless some major opportunity came up. It was a holding sort of an action. While in the east, we were to create Bangladesh. We were to split Pakistan and make it into a new country, which we call Bangladesh. That was the strategy, and that was a theater strategy. It was not a strategy which came from Western forces and a strategy which came from Eastern forces. It was a strategy which came from the head, and that is strategy, and that is theater. The action itself, the planning as well as the execution, which should be left to commands. And that is my take on theater.
On the day of strike, every mission pilot was not only watched by everyone, but also the Chief of Air Staff, who was there in the 3rd Mirage 2000, along with the CO. The fear and pressure of firing a weapon, which was not proven before, was already quite high. So can you explain, sir, what kind of pressure you must be going through at that point of time?
The anxiety and the problem and all the other difficulties which we face with a father figure like the chief operating out of us was that the previous day, because at that point in time we were operating in the 223 Squadron complex in Adampur, and we were from Gwalior, and we were working in an environment where we were not very, it was a working environment. And suddenly now you realize the chief was coming to fly with us. We had to get everything in order. We had to sort of make sure that, everything was pick and span, and the squadron was sort of set up right. And all that happened the previous day because the chief was visiting us. On the actual day itself, the very fact that he was flying with us was just of a peripheral interest to us, because the fact was that we were doing a mission, and the complexity of the mission was such that there was no time or thought for anything beyond the constraints of that mission. I did not even know whether I had a child or a wife back at Gwalior, or the chief was flying with me. I was so focused on what we had to do. And I'm sure each one of us, when we do something very dangerous and something which is very, intricate and complex, we forget everything else. You sort of concentrate. And that's not something which I was doing. I think every one of us in that formation, and any human would naturally focus on the task at hand and just sort of eliminate from the your thought process anything else. So that's the way it was.
So, as you were preparing for the mission, or while flying towards target, or while even attacking, or even after landing back, did it occur to you that you have just become a part of history dealing with IAF's first ever smart weapons use in an offensive airstrike?
No, not really. I mean, you didn't have time for all that. Yes, but after the mission was over, it dawned on us, yes, this is historical. But when we were at it, or we were planning for it, it was something which had to be done. It was time critical. It was essential that we hit the target. We had to prove the equipment, and we had to prove the aircraft, and we had to prove ourselves. It was our professionalism which was being sort of on display there. And therefore, there was this anxiety that would we be up to the task? Would we do it? Would our team do it? Because after all, this is a combination of huge amount of resources which have gone in. And I must say the sort of exhilaration we felt when we got back, when we actually pushed the trigger and we saw the bomb, we felt the bomb leave the aircraft. And when we saw the bomb explode accurately, I think that sort of, the euphoria, the sense of happiness, which I vividly recall at that time, I think it was sort of absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Great, sir. Today, technology has really changed in very many ways. No doubt, since your team was inventing and testing a new weapon, it was a very different kind of a task dealing with smart weapons. So this is on a lighter note that today, use of smart weapons, is it going to create a dumb pilot as all calculations are done by advanced computers?
No, I don't think so. Some tasks are getting easier, but some tasks are getting more complex.
Okay.
We might have a pilot who might need not have the sort of motor skills that we had to operate the latest generation of aircrafts. But the fact remains, the complexity in systems, the complexity in achieving a certain task, however much thought that go into it to make it simpler, is bound to carry on increasing. Today, what we have in the Mirage cockpit and its capability is what was the standards by which I would see that it is available today. However, if I were to take the same task and do it in a Rafale, I guess it would be more simpler and more easy to execute. But the fact is, the complexities involved in getting the Rafale, manufacturing it, producing it, and flying it would not have reduced. Yes, the maintenance practices, the sort of schedules, engineering schedules, all of them would have gone down. But the technology, as it goes up, causes an definite increase in the workload of somebody else. If things have to be easy for me, the pilot in the cockpit, it is going to be difficult for a designer and for a manufacturer of that same thing. It is not going to be easy. Look at what is happening in the UAV field. Even today, can I put a 500 kg bomb on Tiger Hill top with the UAV which we have today? I don't think so. We don't have that capability. Yes, we can put in 20 kg or 30 kg. We can probably do of weights of that nature. But if it were to be dropping a laser guided bomb of 500 kg weight on that hilltop, even today, I do not think we have any other option but to use a manned airborne platform. The airborne platforms which are available today widely in production, they are generally not more superior than the Spitfires of the 1940s in terms of performance. Other than the fact that today's UAVs, I'm talking of the fossil fuel driven ones, and probably even the solar powered ones, can probably operate for a long duration. But in terms of their speed, in terms of their turn rates, in terms of their altitude, they are just about roughly equal to what the Spitfire was. Other than new prototypes which are regularly coming out, which have got stealth and which have got a lot of new things happening, but they have yet to be realized, and which will take another 5 to 10 years to actually get into production and be actually available to the forces to employ. So we are working today with performance technologies of the 1940s in the UAV regime. The small drones, they all will be easy to fly and operate and all that, but they cannot do the sort of load lifting required to get to that place. Furthermore, as these things get bigger and bigger and more capable, their cost is bound to go up. And at these levels, we cannot sort of start affording to lose them. The cost goes up and they become as expensive as probably manned aircraft. At that point in time, we cannot afford to take chances with the safety of these things because it's now cost prohibitive. And the challenge now lies in having low cost, high volume production of small drones and such like, which can probably swarm or which can do so many things which can sort of saturate the enemy forces, but at the same time keep costs to a minimal level so that we can achieve our task. Take a look into the civilian space. In the civilian space, from a 4-engine jet or a 6-engine jet, today we have reduced ourselves down to 2-engine jets. That is a standard aircraft, the Boeing 777, the Boeing 787, the Boeing 737, or the Airbus families of, they're all 2-engine aircrafts. And they're also 2 pilots. They started off with a crew of 6 or 8, and then finally, one by one, technology kept replacing individual members. At one point in time, we had three cockpit crew with a navigator. Today, with technology, we are down to two pilots. However, in the drawing board today, we still do not have an aircraft with one engine and with one pilot. It's not even in the drawing board today. When that happens, of one engine, which is so reliable and so capable that we can afford to do with it, and with the situation where the aircraft can fly itself totally, we could probably put in one pilot. But that has not happened in the drawing board today. So it is like, in the 1960s, people used to talk about flying cars, where people could go from one place to the other in a flying car. The Jetson comics were very popular, and it looked like 20 years from now, we would reach there. Today, 60 years later, we still don't have flying cars. Technology has a path of its own. We have moved a lot forward, but to assume a big jump where we suddenly say that, oh, everything is going to be unmanned, I think that's a long way to go, because as you keep getting bigger and bigger in unmanned sizes, the cost will keep going up. And when cost goes up, you'll invariably want to put in a safety element. But there will come a time where we will get out of, we will have autonomous aircraft which will take decisions of their own, and which will probably attack or carry payload or do whatever it was you wanted to do, and huge payloads at it, and at very expensive costs, without endangering safety.
Since it was a teamwork which brought success after putting in a lot of hard work, may I request you to kindly name the key personnel who were directly involved in this particular project, along with their specific contributions?
Actually, to name them, I would take about half an hour. In terms of who and all were involved, and some of the people are unknown to me. Okay. Because of this, it's the entire Indian Air Force which was working. And let me get into some details. You see, we had to get recce films, which had to come from MiG-25s, from MiG-21s, from Jaguars, which had to be processed by the photo interpreters and mosaic made, and target identified and coordinated. Everything had to be done. Some were in Air Headquarters, some were at Western Air Command. The aircraft itself was from Gwalior. The entire complex at Gwalior, the maintenance crew there were responsible for making sure that all our equipment on board the aircraft were kept serviceable. The electronic warfare, the navigation systems, all of them were tuned to peak efficiency. There must have been 1,000 people in Gwalior involved in that particular task alone. We had another few thousand people in Adampur itself, making sure that the runway was in operating order. We had people in the bomb base at Adampur arming those weapons. They were probably flown in from all over the Air Force, augmented for this particular task, and specialists in their field. We had so many people. I mean, to name them. And now at the squadron level, we had the entire squadron which is involved, at least the part of the squadron which was there at Adampur. And in every which way, it was a team effort. It was fortunate for me that I pressed the trigger, but the people who allowed me to do that, I think there were over 5,000 people, or to be honest. Each one of them played a critical role, and to say that this person was not required or that person was required, I think would be wrong and totally impractical. And I think that's what we are as an Air Force. We are a team. Whatever we do, whatever achievement we do, it happens because of team effort.
Lastly, before we end, sir, what would you like to say to the youth of nation on this glorious day?
The Indian Air Force is a very fantastic organization. It involves very high technology at one end, and it requires passionate youngsters who want to get into this unique field, this challenging field, where you have to not only be knowledgeable, You have to be passionate about that particular field which you want to be, if you want to do well. The Indian Air Force is about adventure. It's about comradeship. It's about teamwork. And it's about fighting to win. The Indian Air Force is about dominating the airspace and making sure that we win every engagement that we go for. And if you want to join us, you want to be a winner. And if you want to be a winner, you have to work towards it. You have to gear yourself, focus yourself, study hard, work hard, be physically fit. And if you have all these traits, I think you will be a big asset to your country and to the Indian Air Force. Thank you.
I thank you very much, sir, for your most valuable information. And I'm very confident that your talk will certainly motivate every Indian, be it the young or old, including our air warriors.